Well, welcome back, everyone. Today we're in Chapter 9 as we go into Week 10. And today our topic is going to be, and the chapter is going to be, leadership communication. Now, many times we don't think about what happens when we communicate with people. We just do it naturally, whether it's speaking or whether it's non-verbal or whether it's writing, whatever. But communication takes a process, and we're going to begin looking at that process today as we take a look at leadership communication. Well, welcome back, everybody. This week we're going to be in Chapter 9, which talks about leadership communication. Now, the definition of communication, as you can see, is a process by which information and understanding are transferred between a sender and a receiver. So the way that I try to explain it is kind of like what we're going to see in the next slide, this Exhibit 9.1, where you have a process that goes from a thought to that thought being encoded in that sender's mind, and that sender will send it out, and it will be received and decoded and so forth. So it's kind of like a transmission. It's kind of like a computer system where you have a series of inputs and outputs. But let's go ahead and take a look at the exhibit so that I can better explain it to you. If you see here, you have the message. Now, the message is whatever the sender wants to convey. And if you notice here, it could be verbal or it could be nonverbal. And believe me, some things can be said just as strongly nonverbally as it can be verbally. But something has entered into the sender's mind that he or she wants to transmit. It has to be formulated into something that's coherent, and that's what we call the encoding process. So you formulate what it is that you want to say, and then you have what's called a channel. That's the medium by which the receiver will receive the message, and then that receiver will interpret the message and can also formulate a message which will go down a channel. The message itself will be in verbal or nonverbal form, and then it could be sent right back to the receiver or the sender. So you have the message that goes to the receiver. The receiver will receive it and formulate a message which the receiver will send. That sender, again, will formulate a message, interpret the message, and it can go back and forth and back and forth. Now, I want you to notice something here that's important. Here, you have what we call noise. That's the potential for error or misunderstanding. How many times have you tried to communicate something, but it was misunderstood or misinterpreted? That happens all the time. Well, anywhere in this process, you can have noise. You can also have noise in the receiver and the sender. The sender may have different types of challenges in being able to communicate that message. The sender may have different types of challenges in trying to receive that message. So any and everything really that disrupts or poses an obstacle to effective communication could be those arrows and the potential for error or understanding. And that's what we typically have in the past called noise. Now, management communication. Well, the traditional role of a manager is information processor. They just took orders from the top, processed it, and sent it out, disseminated it throughout the employees. But managers have communication responsibility in directing and controlling an organization. So they are the center of information networks to facilitate the completion of tasks. That means the hub of information is that manager. And if you're going to be effective, you need to understand that communication, both upward and downward, needs to be clearly articulated and disseminated throughout the organization so that the organization is flowing. There are no surprises. There are no blind spots or whatever that could interrupt the communication process. Now, here are a few terms that are important to understand. A communication champion. You might not have ever heard that word, and it's a relatively new word that we've come up with in business. But a communication champion is a person who is philosophically grounded in the belief that communication is essential to building trust and gaining commitment to a vision. So they are the ones who are the champions. They are the proponents of effective communication, and communication has to build trust. And if you think about it, that's not far from the truth. How many of you, when it comes to organizations, now you may or may not be working in an organization right now, but let's take, for instance, even in your personal life, if you feel people are holding back information from you, if they think they're hiding something from you, what does that do to your trust level? Or what does that do to your concern about that person or about yourself or different situations? To be transparent means that you have to communicate. And if you're going to be effective in an organization, you have to be as transparent as possible. Now, granted, there are some things that you have to keep to yourself because of the law, because of privacy issues and so forth. And as ministers of Christ, we need to make sure that we are responsibly talking to people. If you remember, let's go back to Matthew 18. The Lord said, if you have a problem with a brother, you go to that brother in private. Or you go to get two witnesses if it doesn't work itself out after you go to that person in private. You want to keep the flow of information going, but you want to keep it at the lowest level possible, especially when there are negative things that are going on that could hurt the organization if it got out. You're not being evasive, you're not being dishonest or deceptive. You are just trying to make sure that communication is managed. But the more transparent you can be, the better off that organization is going to be, the more trust you're going to have, and the more you're going to be able to get things done. Now, embeddedness. That's when people throughout the organization are united around a common purpose based on a deep understanding and acceptance of the vision and strategy. So once that vision and strategy is embedded, it's ingrained in those employees' minds, it's going to have an effect on their behavior. They will understand what they're all about. A lot of times, just to be able to communicate what you're all about, your vision, your mission, the values, which every employee should know anyway, but to reemphasize that or reiterate that from time to time. There are some companies that are so serious about their vision statement and mission statement that they have them wear it around their neck at work so that they can constantly have a reminder of this is who we are and what we value. And the more you are exposed to that, the more it's going to be embedded, and you'll have a deeper understanding of that organization. Sense giving. That's the process of influencing how others make sense of the organization, where they fit within it, and the larger purpose of their work. Some of the classes that I teach are graduate classes, and these people are already in the workplace. They're already professionals, and many of them have communicated that they have a low morale because they don't know where they fit in the organization. They don't know what purpose they serve. All they know is that they go in, they clock in, or they report to work. They have their responsibilities for that day, and at the end of the day, they go home. They're none the wiser for knowing how their contributions have affected that organization or how other people might have affected their ability to do their job. So there's really no sense of purpose, no sense of understanding. They just see it as a job that they go through the motions of whatever duties and responsibilities they have. Now, you may get the work done, and they do, but there's no real high morale. And where you lack morale, a lot of times you lack motivation and also retention, because many of them went to college or were going to college so that they could get out of those organizations. So knowing where you stand being a communication champion, also to be a person who is embedding information in these employees' minds, and to be a sense giver. These things are all important if we're going to be effective managers. Strategic conversation is communication that takes place across boundaries and hierarchical levels about the group or organization's visions, critical strategic themes, and values that can help achieve desired outcomes. So a lot of times the conversations in the workplace revolve around what happened on the weekend, or who's doing what, and gossip, and at the water cooler. I don't know if they still have those things, but strategic communication is being so involved in the organization that your conversations are geared towards the company, what the vision is, what are the themes, and so forth. And when you're together in groups, or when you are in a collection of individuals, in a team, a group, or what have you, those conversations should be taking place. How can we leverage what we have here to get a competitive advantage over our rivals, and so forth? So those are all types of realities and reasons why we should engage in strategic conversation. Now, how do you lead a strategic conversation? Well, as you see here in the slide, you ask questions and actively listen to others. Come to know their attitudes and values, their needs, their goals and desires. This is going back to what we've talked about already with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is that ability to be able to connect with people much more deeper than just seeing them as an employee. You're able to sense their concerns, or when they have concerns and so forth, and address them. So that level of understanding, and you won't get to know them unless you're asking questions and listening to them. Set the agenda for the conversation. Underscore the themes that are the key strategic concerns that are linked to organizational success. And set the right communication channels and facilitate dialogue. And a lot of times when you get together in groups, it's all about one person saying everything. Sometimes it's up to us just to facilitate a conversation. Let them talk. Let them be vocal. Most of them already know where you're coming from because you're in leadership and you know you have the company's best interests at heart. But it's good to let them vent, to let them talk for good or for bad, and to understand where they're coming from. So sometimes all we need to be is just a facilitator. Now, open communication is another, fundamental when it comes to management and leadership. It's leaders sharing all types of information throughout the company and across all levels. Now, in theory, to be honest with you, this is crucial. I mean, it is vital. But companies still are reluctant to have an open line of communications throughout the organization. There still exists a level of mistrust among managers and employees. And the reason being is that many of them really don't want to say too much about anything because of the fear of maybe saying something wrong and being retaliated against, or being sued if they say the wrong thing. A lot of them are fearful of their jobs if they talk about different things and so forth, and many don't want to talk at all because they don't want you to know what they know. A lot of times they feel like information is the key to power, and it is in many cases. But leaders should share information throughout the company and across all levels, and that's it's a necessity. But also, too, it is a reality that that's not always done. As a leader, you work in the company's best interest. Let's say, for instance, you're maybe facing a layoff in the next 6 months. Your performance, the organization Let's say, for instance, their productivity has decreased, demand for whatever you sell or provide, a service that you provide has decreased. You may have to lay off in about 6 months, but you're not sure, so what do? Do you just let them know from the very beginning, or do you try to hold it back and just wait and see? Because if you say the layoffs, a lot of people at that point are going to be looking for another job. So you have to be careful with that. And a lot of times you're going to have to go with whatever the executive level determines. But being transparent is important, but it is a challenge. I'll just put it that way for some leaders to be able to exercise in a practical way throughout the organization. Now, why open the communication climate? Well, as you see here, you get what you talk about. A vision must have an ample airtime in an organization. A vision must be shared and practiced by leaders at every opportunity. A vision, if you remember, is essential. I mean, when Moses was leading the Hebrews through the wilderness, God went before them and God told them, or told Moses on Sinai, this is what I have waiting for you. I have a purpose for you. And that's something that the Hebrews could rally around. They were waiting for deliverance. But God not only delivered them, but he said, I'm going to lead you into a land that's flowing with milk and honey. So God had a vision. It was communicated through Moses, and the people had something they could wrap their minds around, they could get behind and support and so forth. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for them because they were rebellious and they didn't trust the Lord to be able to deliver them. But you get what you talk about, communicating the vision, keeping it upbeat, keeping the organization positive. Those are crucial. The climate of an organization is a reflection of the leadership. If you don't embody the vision and values that you want to have the company follow, if you don't do it, if you don't model it, how do you expect them to do it? So a leader who doesn't embody the vision and values doesn't have an organization that does. And I believe I've mentioned this before. I've been a part of several change strategies where the organizations were failing miserably. And when I would go into an organization and troubleshoot the problem, more often than not, the problem was with the leadership. Because when you think about it, the organization is nothing really more than a reflection of the leadership. So just keep that in mind. And then natural law 3, you can't walk faster than one step at a time. A vision is neither understood nor accepted overnight. Communicating the vision must be built into continuous daily interactions so that over the time, followers will internalize it. And that's true. It takes time. Every time that you talk about changing, think about, maybe this is a better way of putting it, think about some of the major changes that you've had to go through in life. Maybe you just got married. That's a major life change. Now, the honeymoon at some point was going to be over, and real life was going to set in. That's when the adjustments have to take place, and that's when you have to really dig in and work at the change. Some people want to lose weight, and that's a major change. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get disappointed, but you keep it up because in time, with diligence and determination, that will happen. But again, you have to work at it. It's going to come, but it's going to come in time. And that's what they need to know. Now, one of the things that you can do that we've always done, at least I've always done, is during the change initiative in an organization, when people exhibit positive behaviors, you want to reward them. You want to let them know that, first of all, you recognize their efforts, and secondly, you want them to be able to know that positive behaviors towards change and enforcing change lead to positive results. So you're programming them in a way to move towards those desired behaviors and moving away from those undesired behaviors, or making the change process itself occur more easily than just telling people, hey, we need to do this or we need to do that. If you have a new vision, people are going to have to embrace it. When I became pastor of the church where I'm at now, they were dead set against a lot of things that I thought needed to change. I didn't come in there with guns blazing. First of all, I earned their trust and their love so that they trusted me. And if they trust me, chances are they're going to trust my judgment. And then I would introduce things a little at a time so that nothing was forced on them and they didn't feel like anything was being forced on them. But in time, with just little steps along the way, they integrated the types of changes that I wanted to have take place. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened over time, but we eventually got to the end results. So those are some of the laws that you need to understand about keeping and the reason why we keep open communication. Now, benefits of an open communication climate. This will be our last slide today. So, open channels helps alleviate tension and conflict between departments. One of the schools that I went into, a college, a Christian college of all institutions, they were having problems. They were on academic probation. They were losing students left and right. They were under the microscope as far as the state government and Department of Education was concerned. And they called me in to help them fix the problems. And when I saw what was going on, it didn't take me long to realize that the problem wasn't the curriculum. It wasn't the method of delivery of the curricula. It was the people. They were fighting left and right. Why? Because no one talked to each other. Every department, from finance to admissions to academics, they all felt that they were the most important thing in that organization. And as a result, they became very territorial. They didn't share information. They didn't talk. They just stayed in their own little world. So the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. So that led to problems. And the ultimate end to it all was that they closed down. So open communication, talking between departments, up and down the hierarchy, those are important. And it also builds trust. The more you talk, the more you communicate, the more you know about a person, and that can lead to better trust. It also reaffirms employee commitment to a shared vision. If we're constantly talking to them, reiterating it, doing that embedding, then chances are they're going to be more committed. And it makes a company more competitive. Folks, we have a big challenge in front of us in the 21st century. We have to do more with less. And we're competing on a global scale against people who don't recognize most of the things that we are required to recognize by law. Some countries don't even recognize human rights, much less civil rights. Minimum wage, many countries have never even considered doing something like that. So we have to be a world leader in business, but we also have to do it by having the most motivated, qualified people at these positions, going above and beyond and having the desire to see the company thrive instead of just punching in and punching out at the end of the day. And also, as Christians, the Lord talks about let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Be open, be honest, and be loving in all that you do in the business world and in ministry. Open communication has always helped me, whether it's in my role as a pastor or a professor or as a business leader. Communication has to be at the heart of all of it so that I can gain the trust and the loyalty of people God has entrusted me to have stewardship over. Well, those are some ideas that will give you some food for thought for today, and then we'll pick up tomorrow as we continue on with communication. As we close out today, did you notice the process of communication? Did you think about or have ever wondered how many steps it takes for a message to get from the sender to the receiver, and all of the things that can come in between this process to confuse and to make you misinterpret or another person misinterpret your message? There's all types of challenges when we try to communicate, even more so when we're in organizations trying to get things done and communicate across a vast scope of people. So hopefully today you've gotten an understanding of some of the basics of communication. Now tomorrow we'll continue on with more principles of communication, but until then, have a good day and we'll see you tomorrow.